So much, Rumeysa Hocam. Hello, everyone. As Rumeysa Hoca has already told, I work at Mehmet Akif University. My name is Ali Karakaş. I graduated from English Language Teaching Department of Uludağ University in 2008. Then I worked for 2 years as an English language teacher in Konya Beyşehir. So Beyşehir has a special place for me because it's the first place, I just first tasted this teaching experience. Then after a while, I thought, teaching or working as a language teacher at state schools is not the thing that I'd like to do until I retire. So I moved on to Mehmet Akif University in 2009. And since then, I've been there, but I just left for 4.5 years just to do my PhD in the UK. And since 2016, I've been teaching various, BA courses, almost all the courses so far because we have a shortage of staff. So all students are like family members to us in our department. And this is basically who I am right now. So I'd like to thank Rumeysa Hoca for giving this opportunity to me to talk to these, first year students. I also see some MA students from my classes, also a graduate of SDU as well, Ferhat Üresit. He's also my supervisee, and right now he's writing his dissertation. So it's also good to see you. So since this is within the scope of these oral communication skills, I hope to make it a bit more interactive. But I know this is not the case most often, especially during this online teaching. I know this from my own experiences with my learners. It's often me who asks the questions, and after a while, I also answer the question myself. And the funny thing is this, students are quite interested in this, especially interacting through the chat box. But when it comes to activating, the microphones, headphones or speakers, they tend to have so many excuses. Hocam, the mic is not working. Hocam, my dress is not that much fit for these, opening the webcam, something like this. But today, especially, I'll be very, happy if you could just join and talk, or you might just use the chat box because there will be lots of questions again. So I hope you're gonna benefit from this presentation. So I guess you can all hear me clearly, right? Please give me feedback whether you can hear me.
Loud and clear, teacher.
Yes,
So
we
that's
can
good.
hear you.
Also, please, sometimes, I might tend to speak very fast. This is what I hear from my students. So if it becomes too fast, to a level where you cannot follow, please just warn me. Just remind me that, Hocam, it's too fast. Please slow down. Then I'm gonna just pace down, okay? So let's get started. Here are some more questions for you. Maybe you've never thought about these questions. Let's start with the first one. What does good English mean for you, right? This is something we have in our mind, but have you ever just questioned it? What are its constituents? Who speaks good English? Am I a good English speaker? Or what makes someone a good English speaker, for example? So these questions are quite actually intriguing. And whose English have you learned at school? Or the funny part, have you learned English at school at all? Right, this is often the case after like 12 or 10 years of education. Our moderate learners, of course, language division students like your ELT or English language and literature students are exceptions, but the general tendency after graduation, they hardly make up, let's say, 10 sentences in, consecutively. This is the reality, unfortunately. So you're in the first year, most of you, and we have some MA students as well. Whose English will you teach when you become a teacher? Have you ever thought about this? How are you going to teach? Whose English are you going to teach? What kind of materials you're going to use? And often we are affected by the ways that we are taught at schools, right? This is what we know best. This is what we learned. This is what we have observed from or based on, our teachers' practices in the classrooms. So again, we need to consider like what goals will we set actually for our learners, especially in terms of speaking. And the final one, whose pronunciation accents would you like to listen to while watching a movie, while listening to a text? I guess we all have preferences, right? We all have our own tastes, interests. So what do you think about, let's say, the first question? Maybe a couple of responses. What does good English mean for you? And who speaks good English?
I guess I'm decent at it, but I can't really say for sure.
So what's your name?
Can I answer?
Okay, Tuna, right? Tuna. Okay, now I can see
Yes.
Tuna. Tuna, what did you say? Could you please repeat that again?
I think I'm decent at it, but I'm not really sure. I don't think that's up
Actually,
for me to
there is
decide.
no right answer here. It's like an open discussion, so we are just brainstorming. There is no right answer because this is a subjective question. You said something like decent, right? Decent.
Yes, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, it's not up for me to decide. A teacher should tell me that, yeah, you are good or you are bad at it. So it's not really up for me to decide.
But the first thing we often judge when actually, evaluating or judging somebody's English, we often focus on how these speakers speak English, right? Maybe the fluency, accuracy, how do they sound to us, like the aesthetic elements, whether they sound like posh, elegant, educated, non-educated. These things are quite important, especially when we are making judgments on someone else's English, right? And it's often the case when we think about our own English. Tuna, do you think you're a good English speaker?
I guess. I guess I am.
Why? Why do you think so?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I am able to communicate with people of other ethnicity even when they speak English, even when it is not their own native language. I used to be able to practice good in summer days, when we weren't in school. So I actually got to practice a lot.
Actually, you made a very good point, Tuna, because currently, when we just consider the sociolinguistic profile of English speakers, right, we have more non-native English speakers compared to native English speakers. Especially in our case in Turkey, it's more likely for us to come across to meet non-native speakers. For example, if we were having these face-to-face classes, even in our university, we have so many international students, but almost none of them are native English speakers, mostly from these neighboring countries like Iran and Turkey countries. Recently, there's been an increase in the number of these students, like from Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan as well. And we have even students from Pakistan and Afghanistan as well at
There are
all
also a
three.
lot of Russians and Ukrainians.
That's
I mean,
also true.
especially in
And
the Asian parts, there are a lot of them.
true, yeah, from Central Asia. And you know that the universities have these Erasmus agreements, right? Erasmus schemes to exchange students and academic stuff. And the students we often receive come from these, like mostly from Poland, sometimes from Portugal. You know, our students often communicate with these learners. So this is the current reality. So we're going to consider to what extent our schools, our teachers, our materials are designed in a way to prepare us for these reality, real world English communication. So anyone else apart from Tuna who would like to make a contribution or about any of these questions? Like,
Can I talk?
yes,
Hello.
Lisa, please be my guest.
I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but I would like to tell you about the good English. What means good English to me?
Okay.
I think good English is the type of English that we can explain ourselves well and the way that we can give the meaning, the real meaning of the sentence. If we give it to the person who is listening, it is a good English. It doesn't mean how you speak, the pronunciation, of course it's important, but the first fact is to give the real meaning, I think.
Thank you so much, Beza, for this nice, entry and nice comment. Yes, actually, when there will be a time, I'm going to show you two different understandings or different conceptualizations of the term good English. And one actually aligns with what Beza has just said. Are we going to use English to communicate, or good English means also correct English? So how about whose English have you learned at school? Can we specifically say that we have learned like British English, American English, or a mixture? Can we say this? Can we at a stage to make
I
this clear?
think American.
American. So what's your evidence for this to know? Why do you think we have just learned American English at schools?
The first thing I would say is there are some words that exist in American language, American English language, but not in British ones. For example, I believe elevator.
Mhm.
British people just say lift, but we usually learn elevator, not lift, or sometimes we learn both. And also the accent plays a big part. I've never heard the teacher saying, "I'm gonna take a bath." They always say bath, like an American.
So mostly we got actually influenced by the teachers and the materials or the textbooks they use, right? Especially you said the accent part. Just remember the listening parts if you had, these parts actually, because in my time I started learning English in the secondary grade, in the secondary level in the sixth grade, and the funny thing was I did never have an English language teacher, an original English language teacher, because I was studying at a village school. There was this physical education teacher who substituted these English language classes, and I used to pronounce the word kno until I get to high school, because this is the way I heard from my teacher, right? Then we had this fine arts teacher, resim öğretmeni. She replaced this physical education teacher just to teach English to us. And it was again in Sparta, Rümeysa hocam.
Yes.
I studied secondary school in Sparta, Sütçüler Kesme hocam.
This is the first time I have heard.
Sütçüler Kesme. It was like Hakkari.
I know.
But maybe you might remember after the fifth grade, we had these examinations. Devlet parasız yatılı, fen liseleri, something like the öğretmen liseleri. So after the fifth grade, I passed the exams, and we thought it's going to be a very good one. From city center, Antalya province, I went to Sütçüler Kesme, a 1,000 population village at the time, just because I passed the exam, considering that it's a good school, but there was a short of, teaching stuff actually. But luckily, I've managed to survive.
Hopes and realities sometimes.
And I So actually, there were very nice points. I wasn't expecting to hear such comments, to be honest, because most learners immediately come up with the answer like, okay, we'd like to sound like a native speaker. Accent is important. If we cannot just sound, there is no point. It's useless to speak at all. This is what I often hear from my students, and there will be some extracts, quotes from my students. I'm going to share them with you later. Now, let's see. Actually, there are two main, or let's say, dominant views about what good English is. The first one is what we know, like, just a second. If I can use the pointer, it's going to be much better. Or I'll just, okay, use the cursor. So the traditional understanding or traditional view of good English, it's equal to standard English, right? Standard English, grammatically correct English. You're going to follow the rules, especially these prescriptive rules, which tells us how to use English and how to not use it. So you're going to use simple present tense, third person, as, blah, blah, blah. And it's also known as Queen's English in certain, domains, or BBC English, especially in the UK. And in the United States, it's also referred to as the CNN English, but briefly, standard native English. But the problem here is the construct of native English and native speaker. Who is a native speaker? This is quite hard to define. But since, as someone who lived in the UK, believe me, they vary a lot in terms of the background because of the socioeconomic status, the level of education. And in the university, again, something funny that I found, because I was in this mindset before I went to the UK. Okay, I will be in the UK. I'm going to sound like a native speaker after a certain amount of time. But to my surprise, the campus was full of foreign students, international students, mostly Chinese, Taiwanese, students from Europe, and even most of the teaching staff consisted of non-native English teachers. I had Chinese teachers, Spanish teachers, French teachers, but they were teaching through English, these academic subjects. So it was against my expectation. So it also influenced my mind because in my classmates, there was only one native English speaker in the class. And often we had a problem while communicating with this guy. So I'm going to come back to this point. Another view about good English. This is something I found on Internet Archive. It's a book which was written in 2010. It's a very old one. But in these times, the guy actually described how good English should be like. An English that hits the mark. Hits the mark that accomplishes its purpose, right? Success at achieving what you achieve to do, what you want to do. And in our case, since we are concerned about the language, it's to express exactly what the speaker or writer wishes to express. This is exactly what Beza said, right, in her description of good English. This is the post-normative view, but the normative view is it's correct English, it's good English. Again, there are some other components of good English from this perspective. It's good use of the resources available in the language. So what do we mean by this? Resources. For example, as non-native speakers, most of us are actually bilingual speakers, right? We have at least one mother tongue, Turkish, and sometimes, if students are based in the southeastern part of Turkey, Kurdish, in Black Sea region, Lazca or Gürcüce, Georgian. So what matters is to use language effectively, aesthetically, so that you can convey clearly and appropriately whatever you like to say. This is it actually, right? So it's up to you which perspective you're going to adopt, but often those who target the first normative perspective fail to reach their goal. And in the long term, it leads to developing some form of inferiority complex, right? Because you set an aim, a goal, which is very hard to reach, impossible to achieve sometimes for most students, especially after a certain age. So what we understand from these two perspectives, correct English and good English are not the same thing, right? These are different things, but often we perceive good English as correct English. So I hope I'm gonna, raise some, level of awareness among you after this talk. So this is a screenshot from a website which is called Queen's English Society. I don't know whether you have heard it or not, but this is this is not the Queen's English. This is the Speak English movement from Singapore. Singapore is a post-colonial country where, it was actually colonized by the United Kingdom for a while. So when we look at the purpose of this society, Speak Good English movement, what do they want to do actually? Here, I underline it, you might just see. Encourage Singaporeans to speak and write in standard English. This is number one aim. And secondly, help those who habitually use fractured, broken, ungrammatical English to use grammatical English. But I guess you all know that when you're watching movies, when you're listening to songs, these speakers rarely follow this grammatical English, right? And they tend to use informal language a lot. For example, I ain't your mama. I guess you know the song, right? I ain't your mama, like this. Ain't. It's not even part of grammar, right? But it's actively used in the daily life by native English speakers. So where is this in our classrooms? Nowhere. But it's outside the classroom. This is what we are exposed to. This is what we actually face on a daily basis. So it's important to understand the differences in standard English, broken English, and Singlish. Or in our case, maybe we might just say Turkish English or Turkish, right? We have certain characteristics that we unfortunately or fortunately, depending on our wish, remove from the way we speak English, right? So what's the most problematic thing, for example, for your own speaking, if you just consider yourself as a language speaker, what kind of problems you perceive in relation to your speech actually, or your spoken skills? Maybe the problems you perceive as problem are not problems. Maybe there's something characteristics, unique, specific to the way that you use English actually. Anyone willing to give a response? The problems that you perceive in relation to your English or spoken English, or how you like the sound. So Rümeys Hocam, I guess there's no response. That means I shall continue. Okay, so as you see, here we understand in the global actually understanding of good English is similar to the traditional one. Good English equals to standard English. And by standard English, they often refer to the standard English used by educated native speakers. Now let's go back to a native English speaking country, United Kingdom. Queen's English Society. This is an organization based in the UK, I guess in London, and this is their purpose. to promote good English and the enjoyment of English. And let's see what they are trying to do, educate the public in its correct and elegant use. Look, they are not only trying to educate the non-native public, they also want to educate those who use non-standard, substandard Englishes in the UK as well. Elegant usage. This cuts the intrusion of anything detrimental to clarity, for example. Again, it's characterized by grammatical correctness, proper usage of words and expressions. But again, this is not the case. I don't know you watch any UK soap operas or TV series. If you watch them, especially on BBC iPlayer, you're going to see that it's quite hard to understand those speakers. Because something that we ignore, especially even in our teacher education program, we rarely touch on these sociolinguistics issues around language, like dialects, regional variations, who speaks English, right? When we say native speaker, what comes to our mind is mostly the speakers that we have heard in the classroom. Listening exercise 1. Listen and take the right option. And what we hear, mostly native speakers engage in interaction, right? Engage in dialogue. But how about the native English speaker on the open market, at the farmer's market? In the dormitory, in my first year, I stayed in dormitory, and we had a cleaner, a British guy. His name was Dave. Each morning when we just came across, they used to say, "Hey, are you right?" And I just nodded my head because I didn't understand a word actually. He was what? And one day I just couldn't resist. I said, "Dave, what do you say? Please, word by word. Hey, buddy, are you all right?" This is what he said. But in speech, "Hey, are you all right?"
Like Chinese.
And he was of a Scottish background, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. These are also part of the UK, and they also speak English as their mother tongue from birth. But there are lots of differences in the way they produce the sounds, in the way they actually apply these super segmental elements like stress, tone. The melody of the language is quite different. But now the Queen's English Society claims that they're going to correct these English and make them much more, posh, let's say. However, this even goes against the reality in those countries. So actually, I'd like to show a video if it's possible, Rümeysa Hocam.
Yes, sure.
So we're going to see, maybe most of the learners know about it, but this is a story about two guys, Scottish guys, in an elevator. A voice-activated elevator. Maybe some of you already know it. These guys are native speakers. If you just think about, okay, from birth, they speak it, they always use it, it's the official language in the country, and they are part of the union. But the way they use English is quite different. Even the voice recognition system cannot recognize their accent.
Is that the Siri video? A woman, no, not the Siri, Alexa video. A woman is trying to order something.
I guess no, these are two guys, males.
Oh,
in an
okay.
elevator. So, Rümeysa Hocam, can you see the screen right now? Or
No, we can't.
Okay, Hocam, let me try. I'm going to reshare the screen. Scottish elevator. So, it's a short one.
What's the buttons? Oh no, they installed voice recognition technology in this lift. I heard about this. Voice recognition technology in a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology? No. They don't do Scottish accents. 11.
Could you please repeat that?
11. 11. 11. 11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent.
11. 11. Sounds Irish, not American.
Not, doesn't it?
11. Where in America is that? Dublin?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
Try an English accent, right? 11. 11.
You for the same part of England as Dick Van Dyke.
Listen, you're then smartass.
Please speak slowly and clearly.
Smartass.
11.
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
11. If you don't understand the lingo, away back home to your own country.
Ooh, is that talk now, is it? Away back to your own country?
Oh, don't start, Mr. Bleeding Heart. How can you be racist to a lift?
Please speak slowly and clearly.
11. 11. 11. 11.
You're just saying it the same way.
I'm going to keep saying it until I understand Scottish, all right? 11. 11. 11. 11.
I'll just take his head out of your cow. Just open the doors.
This is a voice-activated elevator. Please state which floor you would like to go to in a clear and calm manner.
Calm. Where's that from? Why is it telling people to be calm?
Because I knew they'd be selling this to Scottish people who'd be going after nuts.
You have not selected a floor.
Aye, we have. 11.
If you would like to get out of the elevator without selecting a floor, simply say, "Open the doors, please."
Please. Please. Suck my wally.
Maybe we should just say please.
I'm not begging that for nothing.
Open the doors, please.
Please. Pathetic.
Please remain calm.
What are you up tonight? Get up now. I just wait for it to speak.
You have not selected a floor.
You your cow. You don't listen to these doors. I'm going to come to America. I'm going to fight whatever desperate act of your voice, and I'm going to go into jail for you.
Scotland, you bastard!
Scotland!
Scotland!
Scotland! Freedom! Freedom!
I guess the message is clear right now, but I especially turn on subtitles just to show you when the voice recognition system speaks, there is a proper, translation or decoding and subtitles. When these Scottish guys start speaking, sometimes they couldn't actually correctly use the subtitles because even YouTube or the subtitling system used by Google cannot recognize the non-standard English. So there are some more videos, but I'm not going to spend time. I'm going to share the slide with Rümeysa Hoca. So if you're interested, you can get it from Rümeysa Hoca and look at the other videos. Let me continue where we just left. Okay. I guess I need to reshare the screen.
Okay.
So, Queen's English Society. Now, I told you at the beginning of the talk, I also asked the same questions to my students, and it was 2 years ago. I offered these listening and pronunciation classes, and at the beginning of the term, the first week, I give them a piece of paper and ask them a couple of questions. My main purpose is to see the change towards the end of the term because I bring lots of materials which includes videos like this. Then we have discussions like the questions, that you were just asked. I keep them asking the same questions. Who speaks English? What accent do you like? Do you think you're a good English speaker? And this is like, out of these 42 first year students, the majority describe English like this. Who speaks? It's a language used and spoken perfectly by their native speakers. Also, in good English, there shouldn't be any grammatical mistake. Speaking should be very fluently. And here again, by fluently, they refer to the fluency of native English speakers. So as you see, this is actually there's an alignment with the traditional view of good English, even in students' minds. I can speak good English with some examples. Sorry, explain. Not the corrupt English, right? It's very important, not the corrupt English. But I'm going to tell you something. I guess you haven't started taking these literature classes, but when you start taking your classes about literature, you're going to see that there have been some periods in the development of the English language, like Victorian times, Middle English, Old English. So if I show you a text from these Old English times, believe me, you're not going to think that's English. So what does it tell us? It tells us that language is something dynamic and evolving. So prescriptive rules, yes, we might just determine some prescriptive rules, but we have these descriptive usage as well. How people use language rather than how we just think they should use language. A mismatch between prescriptive rules and real individual practices or usage of language in communication. So for these students, good English actually included some elements of like native-like performance, native-like pronunciation and accent. So these were the major attributes of good English speakers according to most students. But there were some, like Beyza and Tuna, they made a different definition. They said, okay, by good English, what they understand is good communication all over the world, right? We are not learning a language now. It's just spoken on a tiny island, the UK. Yes, it's the birthplace of the language. It emerged on this tiny language, but right now it's the global lingua franca. Wherever we go, even in Turkey, right, with different speakers from different backgrounds, we can communicate through English. If you go to Thailand, that's the same case. If you go wherever you go, if you speak English to a level that you can communicate, you can get things done. And that's the main function of the language, right? Get things done, whatever you like to do. It might be for business purposes, academic purposes, or for any other purposes. Expressing yourself and your ideas easily. As you see, there is no reference to correct English, correct pronunciation, accurate pronunciation, because we need to be very practical, especially when it comes to using English. And mostly the main thing is about the ownership of English, our understanding of who owns English currently. And there are debates again on this heated issue, but currently the new understanding is a global language like English cannot be just guarded or protected or regulated by native English speakers. And the main reason, we just think about the time we spent for learning English, years, right? Time, effort, just to master English, to be able to, use it English for own purposes. Now it's going to be also the way that you're going to make your money as language teachers in the future. So it gives us right to claim ownership. That means we can also use English in our own terms, of course, on condition that we maintain mutual intelligibility, like the balance between accuracy and fluency. Of course, grammatical corrections are sometimes deteriorate the communication, right? It makes things harder, or it creates a vague meaning. So clarity is important. And also just think about the differences between English and Turkish. Or it's also the same for many other languages, right? Contrastive analysis. There are some certain ones, since we are speaking about conversation, there are some certain sounds in English which we do not have in our sound system, like the V and W and V, right? Or TH sounds. And I remember our language teacher at the high school used to just force us to sound like native speak, like stick your tongue out, think. But even if I know this rule, in principle, and I can practice it individually, at the time of speech, my tongue immediately moves to the closest sound, right? T or D in our case. For Russians, it's thank you. You might have heard, if you have any Russian friends, thank you. For Germans, they tend to go to the closest sound in the language system. And this is something quite normal because we don't have these sounds. Another issue, our personal identity, right? I'm Turkish. The Germans are Germans. So why should I try to sound like somebody else? Because I'm not English and I cannot sound like a native English speaker. But this is not to say that you shouldn't aim for sounding like a native speaker. If this is your desire, this is your wish, this is your goal, of course. But I'm just trying to raise some awareness about other options, like being an intercultural speaker, skilled communicator, communicating with any speaker at any condition, under any circumstances, right? Because most of our learners find it hard to understand non-native speakers, especially in listening classes. Why? They lack this familiarity. They've got never exposed to such Englishes before, like South African Englishes, very hard to understand. Indian Englishes, Pakistani English, Thai English, for example, it's a very tonic language. since I was surrounded by many Thai friends, I really like the way they sound, for example. Ali, are you coming to my party today? Oh, Ali, you make me happy. This is how most Thai speakers sound actually, right? Tonic language. Just think about the foreigners who speak Turkish. Do we expect them to sound like Turkish speakers? Because the Turkish spoken by Rumeysa Hoca and by me will be quite different. And who obeys the grammatical rules while speaking Turkish on a daily life? Especially in Burdur, Isparta, I guess Rumeysa Hocam also knows, they have these very special dialect. Buzum ne yapıyorsun? Geliver şuradan şunu alıver bakalım. Who speaks like this? But this is the native Turkish speaker.
Yes. Girmion and so on.
Siz Gedeon, ben arkadan gelirim yapmıyorum. Tonları bana bir uzat, tonu. Enden elleme. Like this, right? And these things also exist in the English language as well. So for these students, what's more important is achieving or maintaining or fulfilling effective communication rather than grammatical accuracy, native-like fluency or accent. But of course, it doesn't mean that you don't need to, aim for this. If this is your wish, if you can do it. Some learners are good at it. We had a student like this. Now she's a graduate. Believe me, whatever she hears, she can exactly produce it as she heard. But she has some, background, and she also has what we call this language aptitude. She has good ears, in other words, right? But this is not the case for me. I can pronounce it, but not like the way I hear it, for example. So keep calm, and I have good news. So you can all speak good English. Maybe not correct English, but you can all speak good English. So this is a good news for you. So here, are you a good English speaker? Again, this is one of the questions I asked my learners. First year, now they're in the third grade, by the way. And most of them said, no, I do not think I'm a good English speaker. The reason is, again, I cannot pronounce words correctly. And also there were some reference to the previous educational experiences at schools. I'm going to cover this again on under a specific title. We didn't get enough speaking training. This is the major problem, I guess, in Turkish schools, right?
Yes.
And the main reason for lacking this component, speaking component, we do not assess speaking in examinations. At high school, at secondary school, I never remember having a speaking test, but when I passed the university exam, the first thing they just gave me at Uludağ University, oh, Ali, come here. You think you're going to study in the English department? Sit for this exam, prove your English, prove that you're eligible to study in the department. Speaking exam, listening exam, writing exam separately. And I was almost failing, but luckily I didn't fail.
Can I say something?
Yes, Tuna. Now I know.
I believe also there's also the fact that we don't get to hear English. Not just talk, but also hearing is very important as well. I mean, that's how I learned it, by wasting my time on YouTube and all.
Exposure to language.
Actually, you didn't waste your time. You invested in your English, Tuna. Let's correct it. And you're right, because speaking and listening feed each other, right? They are universal skills. Without speaking, it's hard to listen. Without listening, it's hard to get input. And I guess this is also the case for most, coursebook designers and developers. They often design coursebooks in an integrated way. For example, in our listening classes, I don't have a specific coursebook on listening. They often come as speaking and listening. Even the course name, speaking and listening. Why? They feed each other. They provide exposure. But again, as Tuna said, listening component is also, I guess, something, again, most of our teachers ignore in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I'm going to show you some findings from reports from British Council and TEPA about the case of English in state schools, why we actually fail. And here, what we understand, all actually, they judge their English as against this native English, and since they cannot pronounce words correctly or use the grammar correctly, they do not consider themselves a good English speaker. But believe me, when you communicate, when you ask a question about the task activities, you're going to get a correct or proper answer. So the content is correct, but they're concerned about the linguistic part. whether they're going to sound like, whether they're going to pronounce the words correctly. And here, pronouncing words correctly often does not mean that they mispronounce words, like instead of saying examine. This is not the case. Often they are afraid of these th sounds. They're afraid of these long pauses or rephrasing themselves or repairing themselves. But this is what we do when we speak English, right? We pause as well. This is not a sign of deficiency. It's often a strategy. We buy time. Actually, we think about how or what we need to say next, which word to use. This is actually a communicative strategy. But we conceive such things as deficiency in our language proficiency. Oh, I cannot speak fluently because I pause a lot. I say, I use fillers. No, these are actually communication strategies. But since you don't know them, this is how you develop your mindset against such kind of socio-linguistic issues. And those who claim to have good English again said, okay, I care about my rules. You know, I can use English according to the rules, so my English is good. And this is interesting because here, student 12, I'm aware of my future job, I'll be an English teacher. So we hear the identity issue again, right? Because, you know, teachers are our role models. And this teacher think, okay, I'm going to be a teacher, so I have to be the good role model. And again, the role model, we understand from these actual accounts, to sound like a native speaker, right? To point to native speaker as a target model. I'm the teacher, I'm responsible. How can my students sound like, you know, foreign accented? But here we rarely ignore the issues of linguistic correctness, foreign accented speech, and one influences lexicogrammatical deviations, for example. To what extent these elements actually contribute to the intelligibility or maintaining an efficient communication? Research findings says, to a very small extent actually, foreign accented speech. But we never question or we never ask these questions. Do such things like foreign accented and one influences really matter in effective communication? Do all native English speakers use English correctly, pronounce the words in the same way? And the answer is a definite no. Are they all intelligible? Depending on your familiarity with specific varieties of native Englishes, they might be intelligible or unintelligible. Right? This here, the keyword is familiarity and exposure. If you're familiar with Irish English, that means you can easily understand it. But if it's the first time you hear how they speak, it's going to be quite hard actually. I guess here or somewhere else, I have some other videos. Let me just see whether it's here or not. Yes, it's here. So I'm going to stop sharing this. I find the video. This time we're going to see a lady, a waitress in Liverpool, and a Pakistani guy having an interview with the lady. I guess I need to reshare again. Okay. Here's the video.
Scouse accent with
Native English speaker, born in the UK, raised in the UK, working in the UK, okay, in Liverpool.
Maggie. Maggie, how do you say a book? Book. And how can I have a chicken in the breakfast?
You can have a chicken in the breakfast. You ask for chicken in the breakfast.
Breakfast, is it?
Breakfast.
How do you say? So how do you say Karachi?
What?
How do you say Karachi?
Karachi.
How do you say Pakistan?
Pakistan.
That's you're not making that up. That's your
No,
accent.
that is actually speaking Scouse.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Well, what's your email address? I'll ask people to Facebook.
Hesketh06.
Spell that.
HESKETH06@hotmail.co.uk.
Okay, so can people Facebook you?
Yeah.
Okay. I heard you said that Liverpool people are very friendly.
Liverpool people are the best people in the whole world.
Really?
Like the whole world.
How much world have you seen?
How much of the world have I seen? I've seen Spain, Portugal, Brazil.
Brazil.
Yeah.
And you're only 18.
Yeah. No, 19.
19.
Yeah.
And you've seen so many countries.
Yeah.
Wow.
I went on 11 holidays in 1 year.
Oh my God. 11 holidays in 1 year.
Yeah.
You robbed the bank.
My nan won the lottery.
Huh?
My nan won the lottery.
Did you understand what she said?
Not
No.
even.
The lottery.
Not that well.
You won the lottery.
My nan.
Your nan.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So she took you to the vacation.
Yeah, yeah. To Spain.
Wow. You're translating from.
When won the lottery, she got money from the lottery.
Scottish.
I thought she was a nun.
English for her.
No, I can't speak Spanish or anything, so I was just trying. I learned agua, that means water.
That's
You still video with me?
So you do 3 jobs. What are
Yeah.
your 3 jobs?
I work for 2 different agencies. One's called 360 and one's called Mint.
What do you do there?
And well, I'll go and wait on in big events like I've worked in Blackpool Tower.
And
So I guess that's enough. You get the idea. This is a native English speaker, and look at the way she uses English, right? It's quite different from what we understand from native English, right? Or from the listening text, or the course books, or the voiceover files that are connected with the course books. This is quite different, but this is the reality. She sounds more like a German to me. German is my second foreign language, and to me, she sounds more like a German actually. So let's continue. I don't know whether you have ever heard this term, lingua franca core, in pronunciation teaching. I don't know if there's any student, first year student from my groups. I mentioned this, so I don't know whether they're here. Anzor is here. The funny thing, I know the names of my first grade students, but if I happen to meet them on the street, I cannot recognize them. I've never seen their faces so far. So this is the funny part with first year students. But hopefully maybe sometime sooner, we're gonna come together and see each other. But they know me. I activate my camera in the classes, but I know their names. Anzor is a regular participant. So they've heard this term, lingua franca core. What's it? It actually all depends on our purpose for our speaking. Whether we aim to sound like or communicate intelligibly with any speaker, including native, non-native, or we'd like to sound like a native speaker. If you are someone who would like to actually focus on communicating intelligibly, like Beyza and Tuna, this is quite important for you. Lingua franca core is a pronunciation teaching model proposed by Jenkins. As she says, especially she actually created this list based on her experience as a language instructor in London schools for over maybe 20 years. She says there's a list of pronunciation features which are quite important for non-native speakers to make themselves intelligible. So these sounds should be actually pronounced or taught correctly, but the others are all non-core. They do not affect the intelligibility. What are these non-core sounds? For example, TH sounds. When I say, I think, using T, I think you're right. Do you understand the thing? You understand what I mean, right? Or when I just skip the, for example, the definite article from the speech, does it change anything? No, because most of these special rules are arbitrary. There is a movie, maybe you might have watched it, English Winglish, a Pakistani lady, or Indian lady, sorry. Indian lady of a rich man. She's trying to learn English in the United States. And the teacher says, where are you from? Babe says, I am from the India. And the teacher corrects her. No, I am from India. And the lady says again, I am from the India. And the teacher again corrects, no, you are from India. And the teacher, now the student asks, why do you say I am from the United States? There is no explanation on the part of teacher. These are arbitrary rules, for example. Again, most of the pronunciations, of the words, these are arbitrary. For example, the opposite in infamous. No, infamous. What's the rule? There is no rule. arbitrary. You have to just memorize it by heart. So let's see some of the lingua franca chords. These sounds that we have to pay attention while teaching pronunciation or while using English. Most of the consonants, right, including vowels, especially sound, these are important. But these theta, voiced and voiceless versions, they're not important. Again, in English, we just distinguish these l sounds, dark l and clear, like milk, not milk. But it doesn't matter. Or kill bill, kill bill, kill bill. Have you watched Kill Bill? Kill Bill? This is Turkish like Kill Bill. But I understand the learner refers to the movie. Kill Bill, right? It doesn't matter. And she suggests for most non-native speakers to produce the R sound. Because most, especially the UK speakers, most of them, they have this non-rhotic accent without R. Oh, my car is very fast. Harder. And it makes it quite difficult, especially connected speech. I don't know, maybe you've never heard connected speech, but we do not speak as we write. In speech, we tend to be very economical, right? We use reduced terms, and there are some sound processes, as we have in Turkish. Ulama, ses düşmesi, ses türmesi, these are also applicable in the English language, but since we are not aware of this, we find it quite hard to understand, especially while watching movies. Therefore, we tend to rely on subtitles or captions. Then it becomes very clear, right? We understand the lyrics, for example. Why? It's because of this connected speech. The standards of spoken English and the standards of written English are quite different. And there are some other, like, of course, preservation of consonant clusters like product or product. Like, these are important because it changes the meaning. It also changes the clarity. But what is most important, especially vowel length. Give me a piece of paper, right? Give me a sheet of paper or give me a sheet of paper. There's even a pronunciation book, sheep and sheep. Maybe you might know it. I don't know. It's a red one, small. Look, peel, peel. Long vowels. They might actually change the meaning. So these are important according to this lingua franca code. They must be practiced. But these theta, th sounds, l, dark, clear, it doesn't matter. These L or W, rounded or flat, it doesn't matter. We understand it from the context. Language learners are not idiots, right? We understand. Context makes it very clear, actually. And also, appropriate word grouping and placement of nuclear stress. This is the type of stress that we use for emphasis. Let's meet next Saturday. Saturday, huh? Not Sunday, not Monday, not Thursday, Saturday. This is important, right? This is what we also use. Akşam 2'de buluşuyoruz ha. Geç kalmayın. Kokoreç yiyeceğiz. 2'de. Kokoreçzade Isparta Yeni Sanayi. Okay? Another question. Accent or pronunciation preferences in listening text. And this time, there were 47 students. Again, now these are in the second grade. And most of the learners wanted to listen to native English speakers in the listening classes. But contrary to their expectations, I did vice versa. I just brought mostly non-native English speaking materials and texts. Even I chose course books, which feature these non-native English speakers a lot. But in the long term, it was very useful for their understanding. At first they said, okay, they are hard to understand, like Japanese English, Indian English. But later on, day by day, step by step, they develop their familiarity. And along with this familiarity, they also increase their, listening comprehension. They have become familiar with this type of actually accents and varieties. But why do they prefer native English speakers? Because they consider they are more intelligible. They have this clear speech. Their English is correct and perfect. Yes, but the ones only included in the voiceovers are correct, as I show you. If they listen to real English outside, it's not like the course book or the CDs that come with the course book. And they think these speakers are authentic speakers. They are the owners of the English. They are experts. Who are we to say that non-native speakers can be legitimate speakers? We are always considered to be like failed native English speakers or eternal learners. You're going to learn until the day you just give your last breath. However, again, linguistic superiority, they are superior in terms of linguistic proficiency. The only maybe superiority might be actually observed in speaking, maybe fluency, or the word stock, knowledge of idioms or slangs. But in daily life, how many of us are using slangs or idioms, English idioms? I'm blue, I'm under the weather. Who says this? I'm sick. We have much more common expressions. And these things make it actually much more effective. When you start using idioms, your transparency in communication is actually gets blurred, right? It makes it hard for the others to understand you because idioms, there are thousands of idioms in English. And the final part, pleasantness, right? Liking native English speakers. Interest, instrumental and intrinsic motivation here. I'd like to sound like them. I'm gonna go there. Maybe I can find a lady or a boy. I can get married. This was the case, especially for the guys who were, working in the tourism sector in 1990s. Maybe you don't know, but Rümeysa Hocam might remember Sarah and what was the name of the Turkish guy, Hocam? Sarah and Musa. You remember Sarah and Musa's love story? A British girl and Turkish boy.
I do remember exactly.
But I don't know how the story ended, Hocam. I don't know how the story ended.
I
don't
also
know what
don't know,
happened.
but I know I exactly remember their names.
They were on news, on TV channels.
Yes.
And this small group of learners who chose to listen to non-native English speakers as well, they said they find them more comprehensible. Their English is simple, they are flexible, and we are familiar with their English. They also like, for example, to me, especially Spanish people's, English, the way they sound, I find them quite pleasant. So some extracts from the learners who desire to listen to native English speakers in the listening activities. They speak more correctly, clearly speak English, to learn with the best way. Look, this actually reflects the ideology that they are the best speakers. They are the role models. Again, native speakers are the best sources to learn English. This is what most learners said. And those who actually opted to listen to non-native English speakers as well, they said, okay, I find them more comfortable, I'm more relaxed when talking to them. Native English speakers speak more complicated. They speak too fast, and this is the reality. Actually, in contrast to what they perceive, like native speakers are intelligible, my observation in the listening activities, they find it quite hard to understand native English speakers. The task, which included native speakers, they got the most trouble actually. Because of these delivery of speech, the use of idiomatic expressions, slangs, because I tend to bring them not like all academic texts, but from daily life, daily English. And in daily English, it's quite difficult to understand if you're not familiar with it, if you have not get enough exposure to different ways of using English, to different varieties and regional variations. Again, I'm not able to understand the natives, so I'm more like listening to non-natives. I don't know what you're doing in your listening classes, or who is offering the listening class at SDU, but mostly if we were having these face-to-face classes, I rarely touch on phonology. I mostly bring listening text into the classroom. But currently, since we are running these online classes, I also turn to use these phonological issues, but I also mention these lingua franca core alternatives, intelligibility. Then I assign some listening text out of the school, like extracurricular, extensive listening mostly. So what lies behind these views actually? Goals, especially these normative views. Strong attachment to native English, correctness, our previous educational experience, right? A simple answer. How are our actually views, goals, and preferences are shaped? What happens at the school? Our teachers are using curriculum, right? Our English language teachers, we are affected by their practices. For example, the way they correct us is also a kind of a sign which channels the way we use English. You say something like, okay, let's say, I think, Ahmed, look at me, look at my lips and teeth.
Yes.
When you go home, you're going to stand in front of a mirror. You're going to do this 10 times. Then you're going to record and send it to me. Look, if your teacher challenges you like this, after a while, you're going to just develop this idea. Okay, this is the right thing. This is the model. I can't do it. So I'm a failed English speaker. And I took some MA classes at Hacettepe before I went to the UK. And I met Professor Mehmet Demirzen, a pronunciation freak.
Yes.
While giving presentation, Mehmet Hoca used to sit at the back and write down the mistakes in our pronunciation, the tone. And at the end of the class, out of your presentation, you would get 60 or 50 because of these pronunciation mistakes rather than the content of your presentation. Whether you have included the relevant literature, the relevant theories, he was not much concerned. He was concerned most about your proficiency and how you sound. And of course, you often, feel yourself under the influence of your lecture because these guys are prominent guys, celebrities in the field of ELT and professors. And after a while, you start thinking in the same way. I'm not a professional English speaker. I'm not a professional language teacher. Why? I can't speak like a native speaker. But does Mehmet Hoca speak like a native speaker? No. But he promotes this American English mostly. And I bought lots of books on pronunciation because of Mehmet Hoca. I was about to go insane because of his, pressures on us to sound like native speaker, clear speech, sheep and sheep. I used to just study the words individually, listen and repeat like crazy for hours. But luckily, those days are gone. Now I'm more comfortable. Lingua franca English. Be yourself. As Tarkan says, right? Başkası olma, kendin ol. Böyle çok daha güzelsin. So examination boards and materials as well. Unfortunately, most of the materials, it doesn't matter whether these are locally produced or, or just imported from these international publishing houses. They often draw on standard English, native English speakers. But currently, there's a change, at least, in the speaker profiles, diverse of different speakers and accents. But especially examination boards are the main gatekeepers for the change in the ELT sector. So, especially local examination practices. We said this, right? There is no spoken, written, or listening component. What we measure mostly, the knowledge of vocabulary, sometimes the multiple choice test, which has nothing to do with English, actually, right? There's a picture, then you have to find, like, I'm just giving an example about the first grade examinations, then you need to find the word. The grammatical, mostly grammatical items. Even the locally administered, right, language tests, like foreign language exam, YDS. Any speaking component? No. Any listening component? No. Then you get 90, but you can't speak English. And it's also a must for academics, for promotional purposes. Even they are based in, Turkish language education department or history, whatever. They have to prove themselves in the English language, although it doesn't prove anything, right? It only proves your reading comprehension and your linguistic knowledge, or linguistic competence, let's say, grammatical knowledge. So I'd like to give you some examples from the current curriculum, English language teaching curriculum, designed by the Ministry of National Education, and the current practices observed based on British Council and TEPA's report.
Yes.
And most of our practicing teachers are not aware of this curriculum. This is another problem. I'm not going to say all, but most are unaware of this, curriculum, the philosophy behind it, what the curriculum says about evaluation, materials, the target goals, or the issue or the integration of culture. Look, there's so much emphasis on communication in the curriculum, like task-based, collaborative, project-based. This is what we actually discuss in teaching approaches and method classes. But when we look at the practices, what we have is mostly grammar-based exams, grammar tests, right or wrong, true or false, no communicative, elements. And of course, sometimes this is beyond the control of the teacher, like institutional factors as well. large class size, for example, lack of facilities, especially in rural areas. So, but the main conclusion in the report is that in all classes observed, students fail to learn how to communicate and function independently in English. They become grammar addicts. Hocam, give me grammar. More grammar. Shall, shan't, as Cem Yılmaz says. But it doesn't work for communication, right? Knowing how to use ought to, shall, shan't, in principle, doesn't give anything actually practical when it comes to using English in real context with real speakers. Also, classroom interaction. Again, there's an emphasis on using, again, instructional types, individual, pair, group work. And students should communicate in English, a direct statement at all times. Even for 10 minutes in a single class, I would say, okay, that's enough. But it's mostly Turkish. Right? Teacher talk time is quite a lot. I used to, go to schools to observe learners. Even our learners, after a while, they have to switch to Turkish in their teaching. Because this is what students get used to. If you start from the beginning, from the secondary, third or fourth grade, they will get used to it. I spent a whole year in Germany in my fourth year in the university as an exchange student, and I went to a Realschule, like a secondary school, fifth grade. Even at the fifth grade, we just spoke English during the whole class, and they could understand. At least they could give you, basic responses, but there is no use of German in the classes. But maybe for some cases, judicious or the required amount of time might be actually allocated for L1 use. But the main source of input in the classroom is the teacher. And outside the classroom, we have nothing to do with English, even at the university. Immediately we finish the class, before even we leave the classroom, hocam ödev neydi ya? Bunu nasıl yapacağız hocam? English only, please. Hocam, no, I'm going to ask the friends. This is the case, even at the university. So here again, the failure of Turkish students to speak, understand English. And this is also visible in most English proficiency indexing side sector. For example, F English. We see it at the, I think, 47th grade out of 50 countries in Europe. So we are in the low proficiency level, very low proficiency level. Again, in terms of suggested materials, curriculum says use authentic materials, bring videos, audio files, offline, online, multimedia. But when we look at actual classroom practices, our holy book is the #1 resource used in the classroom. Course book, teacher dependent. Okay, smartboard might give us a kind of good impression, but it's all about how we use the smartboard. Now I know there are lots of websites. They just actually put the course content into PowerPoint. They make it more interactive, but the content is still based on teaching grammar and words, reading comprehension. That's all. Fill in the blanks. It's not being used for these communicative purposes. But of course, there might be some cases in which some individual teachers might be using them innovatively, creatively. There are always exceptions, but we are just talking about the majority. And you see the number of use of internet, video, audio, media, quite limited in the classrooms. That also limits the exposure to other Englishes as well. Because there's no listening component or very little listening component. Assessment examinations, we already talk about this, but the curriculum suggests teachers, okay, use a mixture of alternative, traditional, electronic assessment, e-portfolio, track how students progress, use communicative assessment tasks like for speaking, for example, picture description, information gap, or in group a discussion depending on the level. But no evidence of continuous assessment, portfolios, self-peer, or it's just grammar-based exams, unfortunately. And the bad thing, everyone knows about this. We have these curriculum writers, we have these practitioners, teachers, but we just think that, pretend that, okay, everything is its own way. Everything just goes or smoothly proceeds in line with the policy or the curriculum, but in practice at schools, this is not the case. Functions and skills. I don't think learners at the secondary, high school can use English for functional purposes. And another issue, we have these different types of schools, right? Especially at the high school level, vocational schools, science schools, social sciences schools, but they all use the same curriculum. They all use the same course books, again suggested by the Minister of National Education. But the level of English students have at science schools and vocational schools, it's a huge gap. They can hardly say, my name is, how are you, where are you from? So all these digital practices at schools create hegemonic language ideologies, right? Like native speakerism. They are the best, they are the expert, we should be like them. Standard language ideology, we should use language correctly. If we cannot use correctly, we shouldn't use it at all. Remain or keep silence, that's it. Authenticity, we are not authentic. We are non-native speakers, we are failed, we make mistakes. Ownership of English. Look, when language are actually used innovatively, creatively by native English speakers, it's okay. Nobody says it's a mistake, it's an error. But when Rümeysa Hocam and I use something differently, this is error hocam, mistake. You are deficient in English. Why? Why is this double standard? Because they are seen as the owner of the English. When you own something, you have the right to innovate, to make it, just think about a car. If you borrow a car, you're going to be very careful about it, right? You cannot just go ahead and paint it in a new color. Why? It doesn't belong to you. But if it's yours, you can do anything. But just remember what I said earlier, a global language like English, which is used, spread all across the world, cannot be just regulated by its native English speakers, who are also diverse, who are also using English in varied ways, in different ways actually. So how these actually ideologies develop? The number one element, ELT materials, right? The materials that we use to teach English, they actually promote such kind of ideologies implicitly. They do not say, okay, you're going to sound like a native English speaker, but they include native English speaker sound files only. They show their names in the pictures. They just promote their cultural elements, Big Ben, London Eye, Liberty Tower. But currently, of course, there are some changes, especially in the course books. There are some local elements and international cultural elements, but this is what we have been taught so far. Error warning symbol. Look, there are lots of books, grammar usages on how to use English correctly. For Turkish speakers especially, discuss about something is quite normal, right? Because in Turkish, we discuss about something. Bir konu hakkında tartışırız. But in English, they directly discuss something from a perspective. So what happens if I say discuss about something? From a standard English perspective, it's wrong. You cannot say it, but we say it. Native English speakers say it too. Practical usage. These are all actually usage manuals developed for non-native English speakers. Don't say it. A native English speaker would say it this way. Look, they're already shown as the role model. How your English sounds to native speakers. I don't care how my English sounds to native speakers because I'm talking to my Turkish students. I'm talking to my Thai friend, my Saudi friend, my Mexican friend, and I don't care. They can understand me. Remember the example of Good English Movement. They are trying to remove these Singlish features, Singaporean English features from the English of the users actually. And the big actually testing companies, right? IELTS, TOEFL, Pearson. I don't know whether you have anyone has taken these tests. I only took TOEFL once. I'm going to show some examples from the descriptions for assessment, especially for speaking component. Another thing, another material. Well, just as an example, there are thousands of materials, but this is a very widely known one. Hot English. Have you ever heard this? This is also available in Turkey. If you go to Sturt or even at Migros, you can find this. It's quite useful. I just checked it. I got some PDF files. Here what I'd like to show you. How you learn English with Learn Hot English magazine. Now there are some practical questions. Why are you learning English? To get a better job, to pass an official English exam, to travel, just to communicate in English? Yes, there are a variety of reasons, right? Why we are learning. Okay, right now we are learning to become an English teacher, but in the meantime, we are using English to communicate. When we travel, when we go abroad, we use English. But here, improve your listening part, for example. Every magazine has 60 minutes of spoken English audio. You'll learn to understand English, plus you can hear lots of different accents. I just go through the magazine, and these English accents are mostly native English speaking accents. And here, 6, English for speaking. How do native English speakers really talk? Learn with our natural English conversations. Natural English conversation is associated with native English. So according to this understanding, our communication right now is not natural, artificial.
Yes.
Because none of us are native English speakers. Learn English slang, read about current events, news, culture, blah, 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 so you can make conversation with native English speakers. Believe me, maybe for a long time, I've never had any conversation with a native English speaker. But on a daily basis, I keep using English, mostly for academic purposes, sometimes for personal reasons, personal communication with friends from all over the world. And I guess this magazine is also not produced in the UK or in the United States. I guess it's produced in Spain. But these are the ideologies about English. Like the assumption is that we're going to learn English, we'll just use it with English native speakers, that's it. So I have to learn their slangs. I have to just get accustomed, or adjust my speech, my speaking to theirs so that I could be just counted as a good English speaker. But unfortunately, and luckily, actually, this is not the case. And now, IELTS and TOEFL, what do they say about marking and assessing speaking, the candidate's speaking skills? Look, connected speech with normal levels of connected speech is actually a kind of a barrier for non-native speakers. It's quite hard to acquire it because we are not the native speaker of that language. Just think about let's say, football players, forwards, they speak Turkish, but they can use it like us. They can get or communicate the nuances or idiomatic expressions. They can just make themselves understood. Maç güzeldi, bizim takım iyi oynadı, biz var sevinmek. That's enough, right? Get things done. Grammatical errors, or if you make a grammatical errors, it might be a reason to mark you down in the speaking part. The number of errors, the amount of strain caused to the listener. Look, communication, speaking is a two-way phenomenon, right? If there's someone speaker, that means there's also a hearer. So why is it always my responsibility to make myself clear? Because in communication, there is this principle, shared communicative burden, right? We should share the communicative burden with the speaker and listener. I'm responsible to make myself clear, but the listener should also make effort to understand me. So this actually requires collaboration. TOEFL, minor difficulties with pronunciation or intonation patterns which do not affect overall intelligence. It sounds nice, right? There's focus this intelligibility issue. But when you look at the language use part in the assessment, effective use of grammar and vocabulary, it exhibits a fairly high degree of automaticity. But effective use of grammar and vocabulary, for example, grammar, normally we think grammar like something static and fixed, but when we check the differences, grammatical differences between American English and British English, there are so many differences actually. One of them, the use of recently as a tense marker. In British English, they often choose present perfect tense. Recently, I have been, blah, blah, blah. But in American English, you might just see recently, I was. So which one is correct? Which one should I follow in the exam? Or does it matter whether I cannot express myself clearly, but I use the right tense? So again, something for you to think about. TOEIC. Test taker can generate language intelligible to native and proficient non-native English speaker. Look, this is an explicit descriptor. So the idea is that you have to make yours intelligible native, Proficient, non-native, native-like, near-native, what we say in linguistics. Also, clear speech, nice, good control of language forms, and suprasegmental features. Remember the non-core elements like word stress, intonation. These are suprasegmental features, and it's quite hard for us because Turkish is not a stress time language. It's based on syllable, right? Syllables. Hece temelli. But English, stress time, primary stress, secondary stress, blah, 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 nuclear stress. Pearson test of English, the final one. Look, even in the classifications, the ultimate goal you can actually reach is sounding like a native. And for this one, you have to be easily understood by regular speakers of the language. So who are regular speakers? I'm a regular speaker from my perspective, but do you think they're gonna see me as a benchmark for the candidates? Probably no. Rümeysa Hoca regularly speaks English, and most of our students. Stress is placed correctly. My Thai friends never put the stress in the right place because in each syllable there's a stress. Ali, I am coming today. Are you available? Let's meet at KFC. I'm hungry, Ali. Like this. This is the way they speak. So they're gonna fail in this test. Now the question, are things changing? Yes, but the change is taking place very slowly. Here, questions again. Do we need new goals? Definitely yes, right? Because the previous goals, the traditional goals that are set for the learners do not actually work in practice. Actually does not fit into the current reality of English speakers, the diverse ways of use of English. Again, a native accent more intelligible. It depends on whom you're referring to as a native. If you refer to Dave, the cleaner in the dormitory, no, he's not intelligible. If you refer to Donald Trump, yes, he might be. Why is a native accent no longer relevant? So for this one, just consider where you're going to use English, with whom you're going to use English, and for what purposes you're going to use English. When I answer all these three questions, there is very little relevance of native speaker accent. Right? I'm using English with Thai, Saudi guys, Pakistani guys, Russian, Ukrainian friends. So there's no need to sound like a native speaker. Look, I'm Ali, Turkish guy. I can sound like myself. So we have all these ideologues, right? Our own individual ways of using language. Even in Turkish, even in English, it's the same. So, even Guy Cook, 1990s, this acceptance of the native speaker model does not mean these attitudes are right. Yes, we have these attitudes, our learners have these attitudes, but because they have these perceptions and attitudes, it doesn't mean that this is right. So the demise, the fall of the native English speaker. There are heated discussions about, okay, if the native English speakers are not the target anymore, if we are not gonna sound like them, or if we are not trying to achieve their competence, what should be our goal? What are we going to do, for example? I'm going to show you some alternatives, like I mentioned earlier, skilled communicators, effective, communicator, intercultural communicator, speaker, who has some kind of communicative strategies we can use. But let's think about why this notion is problematic right now. First of all, it's not clear what is meant by native English speaker. There are so many definitions, honestly, so many, and they all fail in some respects. There is not a one single definition which we can accept because there is lots of diversity among these native speakers as well. So the question, again, I told you in the beginning, there will be lots of questions. If we cannot define a native speaker, then can we define a non-native speaker of English? We are not the same, right? We are not the same as well. We are also different. Legitimacy problems. Native speakers empowered to make innovations, to use language creatively. They can depart from the standard English rules. It's quite fine. But when we do it, deficient speaker, failed learner. You do not sound like a native speaker. You're not a professional language specialist. We're just an apprenticeship. still trying to learn English from what we think the masters, right? Apprenticeship model, usta çırak. But I'm not an apprentice. I can use English for my own purposes, and I can get things done. I can achieve my purposes. That's enough. Queen English, for example. There's only one person who speaks Queen English. It's the Queen herself. So there's no need to try to speak like a queen, or because there's one single queen still alive. Long live the queen. It's unrepresentative, right? Just thinking about the sociolinguistic profile, thousands, millions of non-native English speakers, taught as a school subject at schools, used for international and international purposes. For example, in India, it's very diverse in terms of languages, and English functions as a lingua franca, even among Indians from different regions, from different villages and cities. They can communicate through English because their mother languages are diverse. International purposes. Even in Turkey, normally we just teach English at schools, right? But now, in most universities, English is also used as a medium of instruction. Boğaziçi, Bilkent, Koç, Sabancı, ODTÜ. Let's say you like to study psychology, you have to study it in English. You like to study chemistry in English. Honestly, the number of classes they have in English are much more than our program. We have around 50% or 48% courses in English language teacher education program, because we have these educational pedagogical classes. But they also have these classes in English, so their exposure is much more than our students actually. And studies, not only studies, we have actually saw this on the internet. Most native English speakers don't speak a standardized version. This is something imaginary, right? A couple of speakers use it. Also, our TV, presented like on TRT News or news channels, they also use proper Turkish. But outside, ne haber, ne örüyorsun, nasılsın, iyi misin? This is the case. This is the reality. Because there's this difference. We do not use bookish Turkish. If you read Recaizade Mahmud Ekrem's Araba Sevdası, it's quite hard to understand. Written around like 1897. Rümeysa Hocam, probably you might know it because I know you like literature.
Yes, I do.
It's quite hard to understand. Even old Turkish, look, 100 years ago, it was written 100 years ago. Teaching competence, again, we have these, communicative approach and communicative competence like linguistic competence, sociolinguistic competence, but these all take native English speaker as a benchmark. What we need currently is intercultural competence, right? Can we communicate with diverse speakers? Can we make ourselves clear, intelligible? Can we also repair communication breakdowns? This is important in communication. When there is a misunderstanding, what we do in Turkish, pardon, this is not what I mean, right? Pardon, demek istediğim bu değil, yanlış anladınız. So this is quite important, negotiating meaning through strategies, pragmatic strategies especially. Reusing yourself. And especially there's right now a turn to multilingual resources. Once the use of L1 was seen as a kind of a, something wrong in practices, but now it's encouraged. It's part of learners, students, and teachers' linguistic resources. Translanguaging, the use of more than one language in the classroom. This is not maybe quite applicable to Turkish context because Turkey is mostly a monolingual country, but think about Europe, lots of immigrants from any background. The classroom, 20 nationalities are represented. So in such cases, just throwing on English sometimes make things harder for the learners. Multilingualism or bilingual practices. And the assumption that native English speakers are the most intelligible speakers are wrong. And there's also lots of research study about this. And they do not always provide the best model. So one of the alternatives to these traditional ELT practices, global Englishes or English as a lingua franca, word Englishes, they have some commonalities. They all want to actually strive these ownership of English from the hands of native English speakers, and they like to empower non-native English speakers as legitimate users right? Rather than eternal learners, failed learners, apprentices, or achieving near native proficiency. So we can actually be legitimate users. We can use English in our own terms. L1 influences are okay. Now let's see some of its principles, how it differs from the traditional practices. Traditionally, in the second grade, especially this is for the first year students, you're gonna get these approaches and methods classes in which you're gonna learn about grammar-based, semantic-based, or communicative-based approaches. Then you're gonna see in most of these traditional approaches, native English speakers are the target. Audiolinguism, for example, the direct method. You should sound like a native speaker. You should never use students L1, blah, blah, blah. But now, native English speaker, non-native English speaker might be target model as well. The good ones. And when we take a role model, what we do, we mostly try to maximize the similarities. We like to be like them and minimize differences. And there are lots of non-native English speakers right now, especially in our own field, academics as well, who are internationally known, who give keynote speeches at international conferences, even in the native English speaking countries. I don't know whether you have heard Yasemin Hocam. She's her own distinctive ways of using English. She doesn't sound like a native speaker, but she's very fluent. She's good at what she's doing, right? She gets things done through English. The owners of English, previously native English, now anybody can be actually the owner, right? I'm using it, right? I'm the user, I have it. I invested my time, years of teaching, years of learning, investing money to buy materials. Target culture, previously English culture only, now fluid cultures, including local, international, especially the neighboring countries, cultural artifacts. How about the norms, native English and concept of standard English? Diversity, flexibility, multiple forms of competence, plurilinguistic elements. Now these are actually quite part of most EFL classes, but we only just try to sidestep them, right? Try to close our eyes to these realities, but these are there in our classrooms, especially after the surge of these mass migration from Syria, anywhere in Turkey right now, in border in Sparta, there are lots of Syrian students. First, they are trying to learn Turkish, they are studying with Turkish students, then you try to teach them English, right? So we are also having these, diversity or bilingual students in our classroom. The materials, native English speakers, but right now there's this interest in including different varieties of Englishes, accents, speakers, and cultural elements. But again, this is very limited currently. But I guess in the future, there will be more and more resources. And as resources increase, I guess the level of awareness will also increase. This is all about the level of awareness, how aware we are. Are we ready for transformations? But especially these ideologies prevent us from questioning these widely held assumptions. Oh, I mean, native, yeah, of course we're going to be like native speakers. We're language teachers, come on. But this is not the reality. You have to question the practicality, the relevance. And first language and the own language, so culture was seen as a kind of a problem, a hindrance, L1 influence. Look, fossilization, traditional second language acquisition terms, fossilized. We are not fossilized. This is the characteristics of Turkish speakers, right? It's not just me, it's just not Rumey Soja. It's most of Turkish speakers have the same characteristics. L1 influence. No, it's a bilingual maybe resource. Into language. No translanguaging. I might have two systems together, not separately. Because I have already constructed a linguistic system which is my first language. Whatever I actually add into it, it gets actually shaped, combined, merged together. I do not restore it to a different part. Why? Look, the way I speak English is influenced by Turkish. They are not separate actually, right? They are actually combined. This is the new understanding. So, what we should do as teachers, teacher educators, learners or users, exposure. We have to increase our exposure to different speakers, different varieties, different accents, emphasizing respect for multilingualism. code switching, code meshing. Well, these are not actually deficient actually practices. These are practices, strategies used for effective communication. Awareness of global Englishes. How spread is English? Who are using Englishes right now? Look, even the term from a standard English perspective is wrong. English, not Englishes, right? But now it's an accepted term, established term in the field. World Englishes, global Englishes. Awareness of ELF strategies, accommodation strategies, adjustment to the speakers, how to make ourselves clear. So depending on our interlocutor, we might simplify the language, right? Let's say you're in a different country, you want to ask an address, but you just see that the person you ask the question is not, is not at an advanced level. So you have to simplify the question. This is a strategy. You have to use a common word rather than maybe a phrasal verb, for example. Also, English teacher hiring practices. This is mostly applicable to the private sector and the European context. In Turkey, you have to take these centralized exams, so they do not care about whether you speak standard English or non-standard English. This is not part of the assessment. But the main problems currently as teachers or teacher educators we face lack of materials to raise this awareness. Language assessment. Why language assessment? Because assessing standard English is quite easier. There is fixed response, right? Right, wrong, correct, incorrect, simple. Teacher education. We have to have more courses on sociolinguistics like global Englishes, world Englishes, and culture. And currently the new program has one optional class, world Englishes and culture. But the problem is an optional one. That means if any of the teaching member in the department is not willing to offer it, it might not be among the courses that you're going to take. An attachment to standard English. This is quite hard to break down, to demolish the ideology of standard English and the teacher recruitment practices. This is most applicable, as I said, in East Asian countries as well. Why? Hiring teachers, especially for colleges, private sector universities, they tend to go for these native English speakers, but they often use them as a kind of a promotional means. Oh, look, we have two native English speakers. They are trying to give the impression to the parents, okay, if you enroll your children into our school, they're going to study English with Carol, Rachel, they're going to sound like them, they're going to be perfect speakers, they're not going to be apprentices like the rest, like those poor guys at the state schools. This is the ideology actually, but these are not, of course, explicitly stated as I just do right now. So, summary. We've just seen how actually the field of ERT is surrounded by certain assumptions, guided by certain hegemonic, dominant ideologies, which sometimes prevent us setting realistic goals for our language using practices, teaching practices. But we've just seen that there are some alternatives, like global Englishes, English as a lingua franca paradigms, which liberates the learners, from actually confirming the native English standard English rules or conventions. Now we can be ourselves, right? But this is an option. If you like to sound like a native speaker, you are free. I'm not forcing. You should sound like a Turkish one. You should use T rather than TH, okay? This is not what I mean. So it's time to start using English in our own ways. Yet, be aware of teachers hungry. And this is the final one. Be yourself, an original is worth more than a copy. And our philosopher, Tarkan, you're much more beautiful this way. Rümeysa Hocam, thank you so much. I guess this is the last yes.
Ali Hocam, I thank you. I feel honored and privileged to invite you, dear Ali Hocam, to my class and to all the undergraduates, prospective teachers, and so on, for this informative, fruitful, and based on experiences presentation. I agree with you. I had some courses, language planning and language policy in my doctorate PhD courses. And I also do agree with you with the monolithic hidden hegemony of English and so on. So I'm really aware of the facts behind what is imposed on us. And thank you for this fruitful webinar and presentation. I thank you all my prospective teacher, academics, and all the participants. If you have any questions, you can ask Ali Hocam.
Okay, guys, look, I asked you hundreds of questions today. Now it's your turn. So if you have any, I'd be very glad to respond to your questions or comments. Comments are also welcome.
Yes, Suna Hocam says, lots of thanks, Ali Hocam. I have to leave. Good day, everybody, she says. And no questions?
This is typical with learners.
Yes.
Look, you didn't get the method. You didn't get the lesson. You should start questioning.
Yes.
Starting with the lectures, question them. Their practices.
Ask a question, user 32 SDU Who are you?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Aya Baysal. I'm studying English language and literature. Thanks to my teacher, Ceyhun Hoca, I'm here.
Yes.
He shared your link with us and I wanted to join. It was a nice presentation. Thank you so much, Ali teacher and Rumeysa teacher too. Well, my question is about pronunciation. My mother language is Arabic. I have a lot of problem while speaking English. So how can I improve myself? I have been studying English approximately near 15 years or more, but I still have a problem in pronunciation. How can I solve it?
As far as I can hear from your speech, you seem to have no problems actually. So what do you mean by problem? What's problematic for you?
Thank you so much, teacher. I don't know, sometimes when I'm speaking, I have problem in the vowels letters, in T's letters, and like that. I want to solve it because I want to have an academical life. I want to improve my speaking.
I think you're all on the right track. Just carry on what you're doing. I do not see any problem in your speech right now, honestly.
Thank you so much.
Can I add a comment?
Yes, Beyza, thank you.
You're welcome. As Ali teacher and you also say, the way people talk changes dependingly. So there is no correct accent like British, American, or anything. I think the main idea is to give the thing, as I said before. Am I right? As I understood. Is it right?
You're right in your own way because this is your own perspective. This is your own goal that you set for yourself. But someone else might have a different idea. But as I told you, Beyza, this is what you said yourself. And I have the same views actually as to using English or setting goals for learners. But again, as I said earlier, this is not to mean that I'm forcing anyone to use like foreign accented English. It should be your own decision. If you like to sound like a native speaker, there is nothing wrong with it. But you should be aware that it's often impractical. It's often not useful for intercultural communication. It doesn't make much contribution to the effectiveness of interactions and communication. But it's a choice, okay? It's an alternative.
Any more?
Beyza, I guess. That's clear, right?
I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Beyza. And Betül Hocam says, thank you so much, Ali Hocam and Rumeysa Hocam. Thank you for
thank you so much for your participation. I hope your students also found the talk useful. I don't know, but it was a good platform, to share ideas.
Exactly. And one more, thank you so much. It was very beneficial and enjoyable presentation, Tuğçe says. Thank you, Tuğçe, for your contribution and for your good comments. And any questions? Any more questions or comments? No? Since Ali Hocam has 6 courses and so on, I want to give him a rest. Ali Hocam, thank you for your great contribution for this informative and fruitful session. I again thank you on the name of Süleyman Demirel University and all the participants. And thank you so much.
Hocam, pleasure is mine. I'm, glad to be, I was very glad to be part of this session, this webinar. It's also, I also feel very great, especially to address a different group from, apart from my own learners. It was a different, an interesting feeling actually, because I already share these ideas with the learners that I have in the school, but talking to a different group from a different university, from a different department was also interesting. Sharing ideas, exchanging ideas. Especially, I'd like to thank Beyza and Tuna for the comments.
They are very active undergraduates, prospective teachers during also my course. I thank you for their interactive contributions.
And before we finish, I'd like to say how lucky your students are to have you as their lecturers. I know you're so active, organizing such kind of events, webinars for your learners, especially for the well-established applied linguistics from our field. So they're so lucky to have someone like you.
Thank you, Ali Hocam, for your great comment.
Great to know from Rümeysa Hoca while she's still there, okay?
Thank you, Ali Hocam. I try to improve myself through continuous professional development and so on. I feel appreciated. Thank you so much for your nice comments.
Hocam, see you, take care, and I wish you all the best in the rest of the day.
I also thank you, Hocam. I hope to see you in the future.
The students, I think, from our university as well. Ferhat seems to be here. I guess you also know Ferhat, right?
Yes, I also sent link to Ferhat to attend. And thank you, Ferhat, also.
Okay, so enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe. I hope we can talk sometime soon again in a different platform, maybe.
I hope so. Thank you, Ali Hocam. Thank you, all the participants. Okay, hope to see you in the future. See you, Hocam.
See you, bye.